Hi, Phil Priestley here, and I've been asked to present a 10-minute video on smoking, vaping, snuff, and other nicotine-related products. What we need to understand is that all of these products are simply delivery vehicles for nicotine. There's no other purpose to them. Nobody is smoking nicotine-free cigarettes, okay? The only time that nicotine is used in medicinal products is when doctors need to get people away from nicotine addiction. So by switching from one delivery method to another, they're trying to reduce or slowly remove the nicotine that a person is dependent on. So let's think about nicotine actually as a substance and the backstory. Nicotine was first being used about 7,000 years ago. Long before the birth of Jesus Christ, it was being used in the Americas and what we now know as North and South America. Thousands of years later, tobacco was discovered by European colonials, and it became a fashionable part of modern culture for them. It became a sign of it was the latest thing. They brought it back from those parts of the world, and suddenly it was in Europe. Elizabeth I was persuaded to smoke by Sir Walter Raleigh, and then it became a cultural craze because, you know, she was the icon. And actually it spread wildly through the UK. By 1660, we've got historical documents citing concerns for just how many people were smoking. And that's even then, when they didn't really even know about the medical consequences. We first started to realise that smoking was harmful in about 1900. In the 1920s, German scientists believed that they discovered a link between smoking and cancer. The large tobacco companies, the massive, huge companies that had been making fortunes, huge amounts of money, they did an effective job of muting the conversation about smoking being a cause for cancer. And in fact, even in the 1950s and the 1960s, such brands were still able to get endorsements from doctors and were still promoting health benefits from smoking. And tobacco companies, even after that, into the 70s, 80s, 90s, tobacco companies were still connecting themselves with sports, with athletes, with sports tournaments and particular events. So this was there to make their product look healthier and more attractive. They were sponsoring tennis events, motorsports events, and all manner of other things as well. From the 1970s onwards, a succession of medical revelations and lost legal battles have limited where the tobacco companies can advertise, and the reputation of smoking has changed completely. We now know that it's fundamentally and exclusively an unhealthy thing to do. We know that smoking is associated with all manner of different illnesses, ranging from lung cancer, cancer of the throat, brain tumours, mouth cancers, and diseases of the lungs like bronchitis and emphysema. Despite this, in 2018, the statistical evidence showed that the tobacco industry was still driving profits of about $44.1 billion per year. When people are making that kind of money, they don't just stop because it's harming public health. Millions of pounds are spent by these organisations lobbying governments around the world to prevent them from legislating against smoking, and they invest huge sums of money in developing new products that they can market and that they can advertise, that will sell the same addiction, that will again sell nicotine dependency and help them to continue to make their money. So what would you do if you were a big tobacco company? Well, first of all of the big tobacco companies have changed their approach to the market. We've seen a decline in smoking. 20.9% of adults were smoking in 2005. In 2020, that number had fallen to 12.5% of adults. Fewer teenagers are deciding to smoke. Smoking itself is hugely expensive as well. So smoking 10 cigarettes a day at the moment will cost you about £12.30 every 2 days. So you're looking at £6.15 a day. Multiply that by 365. You're looking at £2,244 a year. If your habit creeps up to the national average that a smoker consumes, that's 14 cigarettes a day. You're looking north of £3,000 a year in smoking alone. The financial costs of smoking really rack up very, very quickly. And most of that cost is taken by the government actually in taxes. So on every packet of cigarettes, of 20 cigarettes, you're looking at about £7 going to the government in tax, because the government know that smokers are addicted as well. So they can stick lots and lots of tax on that, and they know that smokers are still bound to buy it because they need it. Selling addiction is what big tobacco companies are all about. What they need and what they want to develop is a form of selling addiction that's less associated with the proven harms of inhaling smoke and burning chemicals. So I think if you were a big tobacco company, you'd be working hard to recover your reputation from all of the health scandals, and you'd be looking for a way to get people to keep using nicotine so that you could keep making their money. You don't want to lose your part of that $40 billion per year profit. And don't forget, they are simply selling one of the most addictive substances in the world. How addictive is nicotine? Put simply, nicotine is a substance that is as addictive for the human brain as cocaine and heroin. Pharmaceutical studies have proven that the likelihood of addiction is as high as the most addictive illegal Class A drugs. Nicotine is a stimulant. It gives people a bit of a buzz, and that can feel like a lift. So if it's administered in a small dose, that can be quite pleasurable and feel like a relief if you're feeling stressed or if you're feeling tired. Why, if it's this addictive, why are cigarettes not straightforward and illegal? Well, the immediate harms that are associated with smoking, the immediate day one harms, are not as pronounced as you would expect to see from being addicted to crack cocaine, or heroin. So simply on that basis alone, and the fact that things happen slowly and over a longer period of time, the government regulators look at that and they say, well, people can make their own choice. Society isn't going to fall down around us from people smoking. And unfortunately, when people start taking heroin and crack and coke, you start to see a disintegration very, very quickly. Being addicted to anything, particularly to the extent that people get addicted to nicotine, is not desirable. If you've ever met a smoker who needed a cigarette or who couldn't find a lighter or some matches, you'll know what I'm talking about. A different side of their character comes out altogether. Being addicted to something means you have little choice about whether you buy it or you don't buy it. Cigarettes are expensive. Alternatives to smoking might look cheaper, but you need to add up the frequency of how often you need to buy them once you get addicted. If you get addicted to something that you can't afford, the temptation is huge. And this is what has taken many people down the road of stealing or committing other criminal offences to afford what they feel they need. If the average smoker is spending over £3,000 a year on their habit, it's probably not going to drive them into criminal behaviours. But if you're a teenager and you don't have an adult wage coming in, finding £250 a month, which is enough to buy a pretty nice car, can be quite a big challenge. So what are the alternatives to smoking? Well, the most common alternative to smoking cigarettes is vaping. Vaping is regarded as something that is more healthy than smoking, which is a bit like saying that it's better than getting poisoned by cigarettes, but we know that doesn't really stand as a test for anything being particularly healthy or as a positive choice. I think most doctors would say that a few things are actually as harmful as smoking. So vaping is seen to be a positive choice if it stops you from smoking. But why would you start vaping if you weren't smoking in the first place? Vaping really started to hit the market in about 2007 with the first e-cigarettes, and that's given us roughly 15 years of common use to look at it. Do we have a generation of independent study to look at the outcomes of vaping? No, not yet. We know that you have to be incredibly careful about what you vape because you're breathing it into your lungs. There have been numerous reports of people vaping dangerous substances and poisoning themselves as a consequence. Vaping is less expensive than smoking, mainly due to the fact that it isn't taxed as highly. But remember, if you're addicted, your use is likely to increase and the cost will add up over a period of time. What about other nicotine replacement products like snuff and snus? Well, snuff is a tobacco product. It contains harmful chemicals and it's linked to many of the same health-related problems. Again, the risks are generally lower than smoking, but you could probably say the same for being hit with a heavy vehicle at low speeds. Snuff is still linked to cancers of the mouth and pancreas, and it's linked to increased likelihood of stroke and heart disease, and it can still have adverse effects on unborn children or the ability to conceive and start a family. Snus is more worrying. It's not very widespread in the UK, and it's generally more popular in Scandinavian countries such as Sweden. Snus generally gives a huge, overwhelming hit of nicotine and comes with the warning that it's only for experienced heavy smokers. So how big of a nicotine hit are we actually talking about? Well, in a cigarette, you're looking at about 12 milligrams of nicotine. But once that has burned, you're down to about 10%, maybe 1 or 2 milligrams of nicotine remain and actually get ingested by the body. Snus often promises a hit of 100 milligrams of nicotine in one tablet that is allowed to dissolve in the mouth, usually by pressing it against your gum. This is like 50 to 100 cigarettes in one big hit. And unlike smoking, where that 1 or 2 milligrams of nicotine is inhaled over 10 or 15 minutes, snus is a dissolving flavoured sweet pressed against the gum, and it's absorbed, and all of that nicotine hits you in maybe one single explosive minute. The result is often actually really unpleasant, and it's hard to know why people want their body to become accustomed to this level of nicotine abuse. You might suffer with vomiting, diarrhea, anxiety and panic attacks. You might get all the sensations that are associated with food poisoning, raised heart rate, sweats, a temperature, and a real problem controlling your immediate mood and the surrounding sensations because you've just taken a huge amount of stimulant. This is not a joke. Nicotine, remember, is as addictive as heroin. A cycle of misuse in snus is far more likely to create dependency than smoking, and if you can't get hold of some more, you're not going to find it easy to replicate that hit of nicotine from cigarettes or vaping. The only option that any doctor would recommend around nicotine-related products is that they should only be used to help reduce dependency and to eventually stop smoking. In this, we're talking about the kind of chewing gum and the patches and those kind of things. And medical professionals generally do see vaping as a better choice than smoking. But this being said, other products like snuff and the far worse option of snus, these things need to be avoided. The people selling these products are selling addiction. They want you to be addicted to what they sell so they can rely on the fact that you will keep giving them money. They're not worried about your long-term health outcomes, the shortening of your life, or the issues surrounding cancer and other life-threatening and chronic diseases. This is a hard-nosed business that is motivated by profit, and the fact that the companies behind so many of these products don't want to lose their part of the $40+ billion per year they make from delivering nicotine. Thank you very much for your time. Stay safe, be aware of all of this stuff, and I'll see you in my next video.